Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. It began with a lie I told myself. The lie was that I was only there for the art. I was 20 years old, a student of graphic design, and my entire life was a study in shades of gray. My name is Kevin, and I was the kind of guy who could walk through a crowded room and leave no impression, like a ghost in a beige jacket. I wasn't unhappy, not really. I was just muted. My dreams, my desires, they were all quiet things, tucked away where no one could see them. My deepest, most secret curiosity was fashion, not the menswear you see in magazines, the sharp suits and rugged jackets. No, I was mesmerized by women's wear, the flow of a silk gown, the architecture of a stiletto heel, the way a dress could transform a person into a living sculpture. I'd spend hours scrolling through runway shows online, my door locked, my screen angled away from the window. It felt like a guilty secret, a fascination I couldn't explain even to myself. So when New York Fashion Week came to town and a friend of a friend scored me a standing room only ticket to a rising designers show, I told myself it was for academic purposes. It's about color theory, composition, form. I'd reasoned, my voice hollow even in my own head. The venue was an old industrial warehouse downtown, transformed into a cathedral of style. The air thrummed with bass-heavy music and the electric buzz of anticipation. I found a spot near the end of the runway, squeezed between a woman in a fur coat that smelled of mothballs and a blogger live-streaming on his phone. The lights dimmed. A single, brilliant white beam cut through the darkness, and the show began. It was breathtaking. Models stalked the runway like goddesses, their faces impassive, their bodies draped in fabrics that seemed to defy gravity. I was completely lost in it, my sketchbook forgotten in my bag. I wasn't analyzing composition anymore, I was just watching. The final model was the showstopper. Her name, I'd learn later, was Meera. She was impossibly tall, with raven black hair and eyes that seemed to absorb the light. She wore the finale piece, a gown made of thousands of tiny, iridescent sequins that shimmered like a hummingbird's wing, shifting from emerald to sapphire to amethyst with her every move. She was less a person and more a celestial event. She reached the end of the catwalk. Just feet from where I stood, she paused, turned, and in that precise moment, it happened. The heel of her shoe, a dizzying silver spike, caught on a seam in the runway. Her ankle twisted. Time seemed to stretch and warp. There was a collective gasp from the crowd as her perfect, statuesque form faltered. She stumbled forward, arms flailing for balance, her trajectory aimed directly at me. I had no time to move. One moment she was a vision on the stage. The next she was a tangle of limbs and shimmering fabric, crashing into me. Her shoulder slammed into my chest, knocking the wind out of me. We went down in a heap, my back hitting the hard concrete floor. For a second, there was only chaos, shouts, flashing cameras, security guards rushing forward, but all I could feel was a strange, tingling warmth spreading from where her sequin dress pressed against my skin. It wasn't a static shock, it was deeper, like sunlight pouring directly into my veins. The sequins on her gown flared with an impossible, internal light, a blinding flash that seemed to pass from her body into mine. A faint glowing mark, like a handprint made of starlight, bloomed on my chest under my shirt before fading into nothing. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice husky and surprisingly close to my ear. We were still tangled together on the floor. Then she said the words that would echo in my mind for weeks to come, words that made no sense. "I'm sorry, but this body will now change forever because we touched." Before I could ask what she meant, security was there, pulling her to her feet and helping me up. She gave me one last look, a look of profound pity and something else, something I couldn't name before she was whisked backstage. I stood there, dazed and bruised, the crowd's murmurs a dull roar in my ears. My chest ached where she'd hit me. I brushed myself off, my mind reeling. It was just an accident. I told myself she was probably delirious from the fall. People say weird things when they're in shock. But as I stumbled out of the warehouse and into the cool night air, I ran a hand over my jaw and stopped dead. My usual faint stubble, the sandpaper roughness that greeted me every afternoon, was gone. My skin was smooth, not just shaved smooth, but impossibly soft, like polished marble. I rushed to the reflective surface of a darkened storefront window. My face looked different. The angles seemed softer, the lines of my jaw less severe. My hair, usually a short, unruly brown mop, seemed to have grown. It was now long enough to brush against my collar, and it held a sheen it never had before. "No," I whispered, my breath fogging the glass. "No, this can't be happening. It's the light. It's just the shock." But it wasn't just the light. Driving home, my hands on the steering wheel looked wrong. They were still my hands, but they were more slender, the knuckles less prominent, the nails looking cleaner, healthier, almost buffed. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prickle at the edges of my forced calm. I tried to reason it away. Adrenaline does strange things to the body. Perception is unreliable, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had been rewritten inside me. The strange tingling in my chest had subsided, but it left behind a low, humming vibration, like a tuning fork struck deep within my bones. That night, I didn't sleep. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror for hours, cataloging the subtle shifts. My skin wasn't just smoother, it looked clearer, the pores finer. The faint acne scars on my temples had vanished. My eyebrows had a more defined, graceful arch. The changes were small, almost unnoticeable on their own, but together they created a portrait of someone who was almost, but not quite, me. It was my face, but a version of it that had been filtered through a dream, and as I stared into my own terrified eyes, I knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, that this was only the beginning. The model's bizarre, whispered prophecy wasn't the babbling of a shocked mind, it was a promise, or a threat. The next few days were a waking nightmare of denial and morbid curiosity. Every morning, I'd leap out of bed and rush to the mirror, half expecting, half dreading to find the changes had reversed themselves. They never did. If anything, they became more pronounced. My shoulders seemed to narrow slightly, my waist tapering in a way that made my t-shirts hang oddly. My body hair, which had always been thick, was now finer and sparser. I was living in a state of quiet terror. I wore baggy hoodies and jeans, trying to hide my subtly shifting form from the world. I avoided my friends, making excuses about a heavy workload. My life, once a predictable landscape of gray, had become a minefield. Then, on the third day after the incident, things escalated from subtly strange to overtly impossible. I came home from a class I'd barely paid attention to, my mind a frantic buzz of unanswerable questions. I tossed my keys on the counter and walked into my bedroom. And immediately, I knew something was different. The air smelled faintly of lavender and something else, something new. Lying on my neatly made bed, laid out as if on display, were clothes, women's clothes. It wasn't a large collection, just a few items. There was a simple knee-length dress in a deep navy blue made of a soft, jersey-like material. Beside it was a pair of black, opaque tights and a pair of low, block-heeled shoes. And underneath it all, folded with impossible precision, was a set of delicate lingerie, a simple lace bra, and matching panties in a soft cream color. My heart hammered against my ribs. My first thought was that someone had broken in. A prank, a cruel, elaborate joke. I checked the locks on my apartment door. They were secure. The windows were latched. There was no rational explanation. It was as if they had materialized out of thin air. I stood there for a long time, just staring at them. The clothes were an invitation and a dare. A part of my brain, the logical part, screamed at me to throw them in the trash, to pretend I'd never seen them. This was insane. This was a violation. But another part of me, the quiet, hidden part that had spent years secretly admiring dresses on a computer screen, was paralyzed with a terrifying, magnetic curiosity. My hands trembled as I reached out and touched the fabric of the dress. It was unbelievably soft, cool against my fingertips. "Just for a minute," I whispered to the empty room, my voice hoarse. "No one will know, just to see." It was a lie, and I knew it. This wasn't just seeing. This was answering a question I didn't even know I had been asking. With shaking fingers, I undressed, dropping my hoodie and jeans into a heap on the floor. I felt exposed, vulnerable, standing in my boxers in the middle of my own room. The lingerie was the first hurdle. My mind recoiled. This was too far, but my body, acting on some strange impulse, moved on its own. I picked up the panties. The fabric was silk and lace, a world away from the plain cotton I was used to. Pulling them on felt alien. The material was light, almost non-existent against my skin, and the fit was confusing. The bra was even more baffling. I fumbled with the clasp at the back, my fingers clumsy and thick. After several frustrating attempts, I finally managed to hook it, the band tight against my ribs. The empty cups felt ridiculous, a hollow mockery against my flat chest. I felt a hot flush of shame creep up my neck. What was I doing? I almost stopped then, but the navy dress was still there, waiting. I pulled it over my head. The fabric slid down my body, and a shudder ran through me. It wasn't the revulsion I expected. It was a sensation, pure and simple. The soft jersey clung to my torso, outlining the subtle changes that had been occurring. It felt right, terrifyingly, exhilaratingly right. The moment the dress settled over my frame, that now familiar tingling sensation ignited within me. But this time it was 100 times stronger. It was a warm, liquid fire that started in my chest and spread through my entire body. I gasped, bracing my hands against my dresser as a wave of dizziness washed over me. I felt a strange pressure in my chest, a dull ache that was both alarming and strangely pleasant. When I dared to look down, I saw that the cups of the bra were no longer empty. They were filled out, just slightly, by a new softness, a subtle swell that hadn't been there a moment before. My waist seemed to cinch inward, the dress hugging a curve that was suddenly more defined. The bones of my hips felt like they were shifting, widening by a fraction of an inch, making the dress drape more naturally. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror on my closet door, and the person staring back was a stranger. It was still me, my eyes, my nose, but the frame was different, softer. The dress didn't look like a costume anymore. It looked like it belonged. My legs felt unsteady. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled on the tights. The nylon whispered against my skin. Another new, electrifying sensation. They smoothed everything out, making my legs look longer, more streamlined. Finally, the shoes. They were simple black pumps with a low, thick heel. Getting my feet into them was a struggle, but once they were on, they forced me to stand differently. My weight shifted forward, my back straightened, and my posture changed from my usual slouch to something more poised and upright. I stood up, wobbling precariously. I took a tentative step, then another. It felt like learning to walk all over again. My gait was awkward, a clumsy shuffle. But as I took a few more steps back and forth across my small bedroom, a strange rhythm began to emerge. My hips swayed slightly to counterbalance the heels. The movement felt unnatural, yet my body seemed to understand it on some primal level. I stood in front of the mirror again, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The initial shock was fading, replaced by a complex storm of emotions. There was fear, deep and profound. There was shame, a voice in my head screaming that this was wrong, deviant, sick. But underneath it all, simmering just below the surface, was a tiny, brilliant spark of something else. Excitement. The boy in the mirror was gone, replaced by this strange, androgynous figure in a navy blue dress. The sight was jarring, but it also held a strange, illicit thrill. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible, even if it was only to myself. I was seeing someone I'd never seen before, someone interesting. I didn't know how long I stood there, turning this way and that, watching how the fabric moved with me, feeling the unfamiliar weight and shape of the clothes, of my own changing body. It felt like hours. The initial awkwardness began to melt away, replaced by a hesitant grace. The shame still gnawed at me, but the excitement was growing, a dangerous, beautiful flower blooming in the ruins of my old self. I knew, with chilling certainty, that this was a point of no return. I had crossed a line, and the path back to the comfortable gray of my old life was already disappearing behind me. I spent the next 2 days in a self-imposed prison, torn between a desperate need to put the clothes on again and a visceral fear of what would happen if I did. The dress and its companions lay folded in my bottom drawer, a silent, powerful presence in the room. I could feel them, even when I wasn't looking. My body ached with a strange, low-level thrum, a feeling of being incomplete, like a song paused mid-verse. On the third night, I couldn't fight it anymore. The need was a physical craving, an itch under my skin. I pulled the clothes out, my hands trembling, and dressed with a feverish haste. The moment the fabric settled on my skin, the transformation surged again. My chest swelled a little more, my waist cinched tighter. The changes were becoming undeniable, impossible to hide under a hoodie. I was standing in front of the mirror, my hands tracing the new soft curve of my hip, when a sharp knock echoed from my apartment door. I froze, my blood turning to ice, my mind raced. Who could it be? A friend, a neighbor? I was paralyzed. I was wearing a dress. My body was wrong. The knock came again, louder this time, more insistent. "Kevin, I know you're in there. Please, we need to talk. It's Meera." Meera, the model from the fashion show. My heart seized. How did she find me? What did she want? 1,000 panicked thoughts crashed through my head. I couldn't let her see me like this. But what choice did I have? Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I grabbed my discarded hoodie from the floor and threw it on over the dress. It was a pathetic disguise. The hem of the navy fabric peeked out at the bottom, and the shape of my body was still subtly wrong. I stumbled to the door, my feet still clumsy in the low heels. I opened the door crack and peered out. It was her, in person, without the stage lights and dramatic makeup. She looked younger, more human. She was dressed simply in jeans and a leather jacket, but she still radiated an aura of impossible glamour. Her dark eyes widened slightly as she saw me, taking in my disheveled appearance. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. "It's important." Numbly, I stepped aside and let her in. She walked into my small living room and turned to face me, her expression a mixture of concern and resignation. "You've been wearing them," she said. It wasn't a question. Her eyes flickered down to the hem of the dress visible beneath my hoodie. "How did you find me?" I choked out, my voice barely a whisper. "What's happening to me?" "I got your information from the event organizers," she explained calmly. "And as for what's happening, it's my fault. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen." She gestured to my sofa, and we both sat, a chasm of nervous energy between us. "That night," she began, her gaze steady and direct. "When we collided, it wasn't just an accident. I'm different. My family. We're sort of custodians of a legacy. We call it the spirit of beauty. It's not magic, not exactly. It's more like a living energy, a force of transformation. It flows through the women in my family, allowing us to embody different forms of beauty. It's why we're good at what we do." I stared at her, my mind refusing to process the words. Spirit of beauty transformation. It sounded like something out of a fantasy novel. "Normally, it's contained," she continued, "but the gown I was wearing, the starlight cascade, and was designed to amplify it. When I fell, the energy surged, and when I touched you, a piece of it transferred. It imprinted on you." "Imprinted?" I echoed, the word feeling alien in my mouth. "It found a resonance in you," she said, her eyes searching my face. "A desire, a curiosity, however deeply buried. The spirit doesn't act on its own. It only nurtures what's already there. Your quiet dream of experiencing womanhood, it gave the energy a seed to grow." My face burned with shame. She knew, somehow, this impossible woman knew my most secret, pathetic fantasy. "The clothes," I whispered, gesturing towards my bedroom. "Did you?" She nodded. "The spirit is drawn to its own expression. It creates the tools it needs for the transformation. They materialize for you because you needed them. Wearing them accelerates the process. It guides the energy." I shook my head, a wave of despair washing over me. "I want it to stop. Can you take it back, reverse it?" Meera's expression softened with pity. "I can't," she said gently. "Once the transfer begins, it can't be reversed. The process has started. Kevin, and right now you're in the most dangerous phase." Dangerous? If you stop now, she said, her voice dropping to a serious tone, if you fight it and try to suppress the energy, your body will be caught in the middle. You'll be trapped in an in-between state, neither male nor female. The constant conflict inside you, it's agonizing. It can tear a person apart, physically and mentally. The room tilted, the air grew thick. I was trapped. There was no way back. So what do I do? I asked, my voice cracking. What happens now? You have to complete the process, she said simply. You have to see it through to the end. You have to embrace it. Embrace it, I laughed, a short hysterical bark. Embrace becoming a woman? This isn't me. I'm a guy. I was just curious, that's all. Were you? She asked softly. Kevin, the spirit of beauty doesn't make mistakes. It chose you for a reason. But right now, that doesn't matter. What matters is survival. I am going to help you. I have to. It's my responsibility. And so began the strangest apprenticeship in history. Meera became my reluctant, otherworldly mentor. She started coming over every other day, guiding me through the terrifying, bewildering process of becoming someone else. If you're going to do this, she said on her next visit, holding up a makeup bag, you need to learn how to present yourself. The transformation is internal, but the world only sees the outside. We start with the face. She sat me down in front of the mirror and began my first lesson. The feeling of her cool fingers on my skin was startling. She showed me how to apply foundation, the damp sponge stippling the liquid across my face, erasing the last vestiges of my male identity. The sensation was bizarre. It felt like I was putting on a mask. Yet the face that emerged looked more me than the one I'd started with. She taught me about mascara, the delicate wand brushing against my lashes, making my eyes look larger, more expressive. She painted a neutral, glossy color on my lips. The feeling of the lipstick was slick and foreign. Look, she said, turning my chair back to the mirror. I gasped. The person looking back was an ethereal stranger. The makeup didn't look clownish or fake. It looked natural. It enhanced the feminine qualities that had been emerging in my face, softening what was left of the masculine angles. My eyes, framed by dark lashes, were the focal point. They were my eyes, but they held a new depth, a new vulnerability. I couldn't finish the sentence. You look beautiful, Meera finished for me, her voice matter-of-fact. A hot, confusing wave of pleasure washed over me, immediately followed by a cold spike of shame. A man shouldn't want to be called beautiful, but I did, in that moment. I wanted it more than anything. Our lessons expanded. She brought more clothes, casual outfits like skinny jeans and soft sweaters that hugged my new form, a stunning cocktail dress in emerald green silk, even a full-length evening gown that shimmered like liquid silver. Each time I put on a new outfit, the energy would surge, sculpting my body further. My voice began to change, the pitch rising, the timbre losing its masculine roughness. My hands and feet seemed to shrink, becoming more slender and delicate. It was a period of intense conflict. Every step forward into this new identity felt like a betrayal of my old one. I mourned the boy I was losing, the simple gray life I had taken for granted. And yet, with every lesson, with every glance in the mirror, the spark of excitement grew. The thrill of seeing this new person emerge, this graceful, beautiful stranger who was somehow also me, was becoming an addiction. My heart would pound in my chest, a frantic rhythm of fear and exhilaration. Every time I saw my reflection, this wasn't just a transformation, it was a revelation. The next few weeks were a blur of secret lessons and startling changes. My apartment became a cocoon, a safe space where the metamorphosis could continue. Hidden from the outside world, Meera was a patient, if sometimes enigmatic, teacher. She taught me not just how to look like a woman, but how to be one in a world that would scrutinize my every move. We worked on walking. It's not about wiggling your hips, she'd say, demonstrating in my small living room. It's about your center of gravity. Walk heel to toe. Let your arms swing naturally. Don't force it. Let the shoes guide you. I spent hours pacing back and forth in different heels, from low pumps to daring stilettos she'd brought. My ankles ached, my feet throbbed, but gradually, the clumsy stomping evolved into something smoother, something that could almost be called graceful. I learned the subtle shift in posture, the way to carry my shoulders, the gentle sway that came not from affectation but from balance. We worked on talking. My voice was the most disorienting change. It had settled into a soft, clear alto, a voice that was completely alien to my ears. When I answered the phone, I was invariably called ma'am. "Your pitch is fine," Meera coached, "but it's about inflection. End your sentences with a slight upward tilt sometimes. Soften your consonants. Listen to how women speak to each other." We watched movies, and she'd have me repeat lines of dialogue from the female leads. It felt absurd, like a bizarre acting exercise, but I slowly learned the melody and rhythm of feminine speech. The most intimate and terrifying lessons were about deportment. How to sit in a skirt without being indecent. How to get in and out of a car gracefully. The small unconscious gestures that separated men and women in society's eyes. "It's all a performance, Kevin," she told me one afternoon as I struggled to cross my legs elegantly while sitting on the sofa. "Everyone is playing a role. You're just learning a new script." With each passing day, Kevin felt less like a name and more like a costume I used to wear. The body in the mirror was no longer a stranger. It was becoming my new reality. My hair had grown past my shoulders, a cascade of soft brown waves. My figure was undeniably female, with gentle curves at the chest and hips, and a waist that tapered elegantly. The last traces of masculine angularity had melted away, leaving behind a delicate, almost elfin facial structure. I had avoided going out, terrified of being seen, but Meera knew I couldn't hide forever. "The transformation is slowing down," she announced one day, studying me with a critical eye. "Your body is nearly settled, but the energy needs a catalyst to complete the process. It needs to be acknowledged. You need to step into the role, for real." "What does that mean?" I asked, my stomach twisting with anxiety. "It means we're going out," she said, a determined glint in her eye. "There's an open call for a small, independent runway show tomorrow. It's a cattle call, dozens of new faces. You'll be anonymous. It's the perfect place to test yourself." "A modeling audition," I squeaked, my voice jumping an octave. "Meera, I can't. I'm not a model. I'm a fraud. They'll know." "They won't know," she said with unshakable confidence. "You'll be just another hopeful girl. You need to walk in front of people, feel their eyes on you, and own it. You need to stop being Kevin in a dress and start being the woman you look like, just for one afternoon." The idea was petrifying, but the alternative this painful. Indefinite limbo was even worse. I reluctantly agreed. The next morning was a whirlwind of preparation. Meera arrived with a garment bag and a professional-grade makeup kit. The outfit she'd chosen was designed to be both striking and unforgiving, a sheath dress made of a black, high-tech jersey that clung to every curve, and a pair of wickedly high stiletto heels. "No hiding today," she said as she laid it out. The process of getting ready felt like arming a soldier for battle. She did my makeup with intense focus, creating a smoky eye and a bold red lip. She styled my hair into a sleek, straight sheet that fell down my back. As I slipped into the dress, the fabric felt like a second skin, cool and constricting. Zipping it up was like sealing myself into a new identity. The heels forced me onto the balls of my feet, adding nearly 5 inches to my height and making my legs look impossibly long. When I looked in the mirror, I felt a shock that ran deeper than any I had felt before. This wasn't a boy in makeup. This wasn't an androgynous figure. The person staring back at me was a woman, a striking, confident, and utterly terrifying woman. "What's my name?" I asked in a daze. "I can't go in there as Kevin." Meera smiled faintly. "What do you want it to be?" The name came to me unbidden, a whisper from the back of my mind. "Caitlyn," I said. It felt strange and yet perfectly natural on my new tongue. "All right, Caitlyn," Meera said, handing me my clutch. "Let's go." The taxi ride downtown was agony. Every bump in the road felt like a tremor in my soul. I was convinced everyone was staring at me, that my secret was written all over my face. But when I dared to peek at the people in the cars next to us, they just glanced over, their eyes showing only casual, fleeting interest. To them, I was just a woman in a taxi. The anonymity was both a relief and a profound disorientation. The audition was held in a large, bright loft space in Soho. The air was thick with the scent of hairspray and nervous energy. The room was filled with girls who looked like Meera, impossibly tall, impossibly thin, all with the same look of bored ambition. They milled about, chatting on their phones, touching up their makeup, ignoring everyone around them. No one gave me a second look. I was just one of them. Meera checked me in under the name Caitlyn, and we were given a number. "I'll wait here," she said, giving my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "Just remember what we practiced. Head up, shoulders back, walk. That's all there is to it." My heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. I watched as girl after girl was called, strutting down a makeshift runway for a panel of 3 stern-faced judges sitting at a long table. Most were dismissed with a curt "thank you." "Number 74, Caitlyn," a voice called out. My number, my new name. My legs felt like they were made of lead as I walked to the starting point. The world narrowed to the polished white floor in front of me. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, the judges, the other models, the assistants. I took a deep breath, and I walked. I put one foot in front of the other, just as Meera had taught me, heel, toe, heel, toe. The click-clack of my stilettos on the floor was the only sound in my universe. The lights were blinding. I couldn't see the judges' faces clearly, just their silhouettes. I kept my expression neutral, my gaze fixed on the wall at the far end of the room. I reached the end, paused for a beat, turned, and walked back. The entire thing took less than 30 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. When I reached the starting point again, I stood there, my body trembling slightly, waiting for the inevitable thank you. One of the judges, a woman with a severe black bob, leaned forward and spoke to the man next to her. Then he looked up at me. "Walk for us again," he said, "but this time, a little slower. Let us see the clothes move." A murmur went through the other girls waiting in line. Being asked to walk twice was a good sign. The request sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through me. I did as he asked, my movements more deliberate this time. I focused on the feel of the dress against my skin, the way it shifted as I moved. I let my arms swing with a little more confidence. When I finished the second walk, the judge nodded slowly. "Interesting. There's something raw about you. We'll be in touch." I mumbled a thank you and practically fled back to where Meera was waiting, my cheeks burning, my heart was soaring. They hadn't seen a fraud. They had seen a potential model. They had seen Caitlyn. "You did it," Meera said, a genuine, brilliant smile lighting up her face. "You see, you belong." As I was turning to leave, basking in the glow of my small victory, a voice cut through the noise. "That was a great walk." I turned. A young man was leaning against the wall nearby, holding a camera with a large lens. He had kind eyes and a friendly, open smile. He was handsome, in a relaxed, approachable way. Thank you," I stammered, my carefully practiced female voice suddenly feeling thin and fragile. "I'm Marcus," he said, extending a hand. "I'm one of the photographers for the show. I've been watching people walk all day. And you have a presence. It's very natural." My mind went completely blank. A man was talking to me. A handsome man was complimenting me. I placed my hand in his, and he shook it gently. His hand was warm and strong. The simple contact sent a jolt of electricity up my arm. "I'm Caitlyn," I said, the name feeling more real than it ever had before. "Caitlyn," he repeated, smiling. "It suits you. I hope they cast you. I'd love to get the chance to photograph you." My face flushed a deep, undeniable red. It was a blush that started in my chest and spread all the way to the tips of my ears. I felt flustered, shy, and utterly, incandescently thrilled. It was a feeling I had never, ever experienced as Kevin. I hope so too," I managed to say. "It was nice to meet you, Marcus." I turned and walked away with Meera, my legs feeling even more unsteady than before, but for a completely different reason. My mind was reeling. He had called me Caitlyn. He had held my hand. He had looked at me, not with suspicion or judgment, but with admiration. He had seen me as a woman. And in that moment, for the first time, my inner conflict wasn't about fear and excitement. It was something new. I was terrified of him finding out the truth, but a bigger, more powerful part of me felt a profound, heart-stopping flutter. It was the first time I had ever felt attraction, not as a boy looking at a girl, but as myself, as Caitlyn. The walk home with Meera was surreal. The city streets, which had seemed so threatening just an hour before, now felt like a stage. People glanced at me, but their looks were no longer a source of paranoia. They were just looks. A man on the corner smiled at me. A woman waiting for the bus nodded in appreciation of my dress. I was visible, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a validation. "You're glowing," Meera commented as we waited for the crosswalk signal. "I feel weird," I confessed, my voice still breathless. "That guy, Marcus, he just talked to me like it was the most normal thing in the world." "It is the most normal thing in the world," she replied. "A man saw a beautiful woman and wanted to talk to her. That's all that happened." But it wasn't all that happened. Something inside me had shifted on a tectonic level. The encounter with Marcus had been a mirror, but instead of showing me my reflection, it had shown me how I could be reflected in someone else's eyes, and the image I saw there was one I desperately wanted to be. My mind kept replaying the moment his hand held mine, the warmth of his skin, the slight pressure of his grip. My own hand had felt so small and delicate in his. It was a sensation that had nothing to do with the physical transformation. It was purely emotional. It was the feeling of being seen, of being desired, of being feminine. The next few days were a strange mix of euphoria and anxiety. I got an email from the casting agency. I had been booked for the show. The news should have terrified me, but instead, it sent another wave of exhilaration through me. It was real. Caitlyn was real. I tried to push the thought of Marcus out of my head, telling myself it was a fluke, a one-off encounter, but his easy smile and kind eyes were imprinted on my memory. I found myself wondering if he would be at the fittings, at the show itself. The thought made my stomach do a nervous little flip. The day of the fitting arrived. Meera went with me, acting as my seasoned protective friend. The backstage area was a flurry of controlled chaos. Designers, stylists, and dressers moved with purpose, and models stood around like beautiful statues, waiting to be adorned. I was handed a garment bag and pointed toward a changing screen. The outfit was an ethereal, floor-length gown of layered, seafoam green chiffon. It was delicate and romantic. When I slipped it on, the fabric felt like a cloud against my skin. I stepped out from behind the screen to be checked by the designer, and that's when I saw him. Marcus was across the room, camera in hand, taking test shots of another model. Our eyes met for a brief second across the chaotic space. A slow smile spread across his face, a genuine smile of recognition and pleasure. He gave me a small, encouraging nod. My heart did a summer salute. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks again and quickly turned my attention to the designer, pretending I hadn't seen him. But it was too late. The knowledge that he was there, that he was watching, changed everything. My every movement suddenly felt charged with significance. I stood a little taller, my posture a little more perfect. After the fitting, as I was changing back into my own clothes, a pair of well-fitting jeans and a simple silk blouse that Meera had approved Marcus approached me. "Caitlyn, right?" he said, his voice as warm as I remembered. "I knew they'd cast you. That dress looks incredible on you." "Thank you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's a beautiful design." "It is, but the dress doesn't make the model," he said with a charming sincerity. "So this is your first show in the city." "Is it that obvious?" I asked, a small self-deprecating laugh escaping me. It sounded surprisingly natural. "No, not at all," he quickly reassured me. "You just have a freshness about you. A lot of the girls here look like they'd rather be anywhere else. You look like you're actually excited to be here." "I am," I admitted, and it was the truest thing I had said all day. We fell into an easy conversation. He told me about his work as a photographer, his passion for capturing the story behind the fashion. I found myself opening up, telling him a carefully edited version of my life, that I was a student, new to the city, just dipping my toes into the world of modeling. Every sentence felt like a tightrope walk over a canyon of lies, but he made it feel effortless. He listened with genuine interest, his eyes never leaving my face. There was a moment when he leaned against a rack of clothes, his arm brushing against mine. The contact was fleeting, accidental, but it sent that same electric shock through my system. I found myself hyper-aware of his proximity, the faint, clean scent of his cologne, the way his t-shirt stretched across his shoulders. These were feelings Kevin had never had. Kevin had observed the world from a distance. Caitlyn was in it, feeling everything with a raw, terrifying intensity. "Well," he said eventually, glancing at his watch, "I have to run, but maybe I could take you out for coffee sometime. After the show is over, I'd love to hear more about your story." The question hung in the air between us. A date. He was asking me on a date. Panic and elation warred within me. The safe, correct answer was no. Getting involved with anyone was an impossible risk. Every moment spent with him would be a lie, a performance that could collapse at any second. If he ever found out the truth, the humiliation, the rejection, it was unthinkable. But as I looked at his hopeful, open face, the word no died on my lips. This feeling, this dizzying, heart-pounding thrill was the most real thing I had felt in my entire life. It was more real than my fear, more real than my confusion. It was a powerful, undeniable current, and it was pulling me forward. "I'd like that," I heard myself say, the words coming out in a soft, steady voice that sounded like it belonged to someone else, someone far braver than I was. His smile widened, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Great. Can I get your number?" My mind went into overdrive. My phone was still registered under my old name. I couldn't give him that. I just got a new phone," I lied, thinking fast. "I don't even know the number yet. Can I take yours?" "Smooth," he laughed, not unkindly. He pulled out a pen and wrote his number on a slip of paper. "Text me after the show. We'll set something up." He gave me one last smile and then walked away, leaving me standing there with a small piece of paper in my trembling hand that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Meera appeared at my side as if from nowhere. "You're playing with fire," she whispered. Though her expression wasn't disapproving, it was curious. "I know," I breathed, my eyes still fixed on the spot where he had been standing. "But I think I want to get burned." That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. The physical transformation of my body was almost complete. I was, for all intents and purposes, a woman, but the psychological transformation, the one that truly mattered, was happening now. It wasn't about the clothes or the makeup or the sway of my hips. It was about the blush that rose in my cheeks when Marcus smiled. It was about the frantic, joyful leap of my heart when he asked for my number. I was falling, not just into a new life, but into feelings I had never thought possible. And for the first time, the identity of Caitlyn didn't feel like a role I was playing. It felt like the person I was becoming. The fear of being discovered was still there, a cold knot in the pit of my stomach, but it was being overshadowed by a new, more powerful fear, the fear of letting this incredible, terrifying, beautiful feeling slip away. The day of the runway show was the culmination of everything. It was the final exam for the life I had been secretly studying. The backstage area was an explosion of sensory overload, the roar of hairdryers, the frantic commands of the show director, the shimmering racks of clothes, the models who were now my peers. I was surprisingly calm. The fitting and the interactions with Marcus had given me a fragile new confidence. I moved through the chaos with a sense of purpose. When it was my turn in the makeup chair, I didn't feel like a boy being disguised. I felt like Caitlyn, preparing for work. My moment on the runway was a fugue state. The music was deafening, the lights were blinding. I walked with a strength and purpose I didn't know I possessed. The seafoam green chiffon dress floated around me like a dream for those 90 seconds on the catwalk. I wasn't Kevin, the shy design student. I was a vision, an ideal, a creation of light and fabric. And as the flashbulbs popped, I saw Marcus in the photographer's pit, his camera aimed directly at me. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second, and in that moment, the entire world fell away. There was only the lens, his eye behind it, and me. After the show, the adrenaline gave way to a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. Meera found me amidst the post-show celebration. "You were magnificent," she said, her voice filled with a pride that startled me. "You didn't just walk, you performed." "I don't know what happened," I admitted. "I just became her." "Maybe there's no her to become," Meera said softly, looking at me with an intensity that made me feel transparent. "Maybe this is just you. Have you found yourself yet, Kevin?" The use of my old name was a jolt. No one had called me that in weeks. It sounded foreign, like the name of a distant relative I barely knew. "I don't know who I am anymore," I confessed, the confusion of the past month welling up inside me. "Go home," she said gently. "Get some rest, and listen to your heart. It knows the answer, even if your head doesn't." I took a taxi back to my apartment, the city lights blurring past the window. My mind was a whirlwind. I had done it. I had walked a runway. I had been convincing. I had even been asked on a date. I should have felt triumphant, but instead, I just felt adrift. I walked into my apartment and went straight to the bathroom, shedding the glamorous identity of the runway along with my clothes. I scrubbed the makeup from my face, washing away the smoky eyeshadow and the red lipstick. I stood in front of the full-length mirror, naked, water dripping from my hair onto my shoulders, and I looked, really looked. The transformation was complete. There was not a single trace of the boy I had been. My body was soft and curved in all the right places, my skin was flawless, my hips flared gently from a narrow waist, and my chest was full and feminine. My face, even without makeup, was delicate, with large, expressive eyes and lips that curved softly. It was the body of a woman, my body. And as I stared at this stranger who was me, something inside me broke. It wasn't a violent shattering, but a quiet, deep cracking of a dam I had been building my entire life. A memory surfaced, one I had buried so deep I had forgotten it existed. I was 6 years old, at a cousin's birthday party. She had received a beautiful doll, dressed in a sparkling pink princess gown. I remembered looking at that dress, at the way the light caught the glitter, and feeling a pang of longing so intense it physically hurt. I wanted to wear it. I wanted to be the one in the beautiful, sparkling dress. I must have said something out loud, because my uncle had laughed and ruffled my hair. "Don't be silly, Kevin," he'd said, his voice booming and cheerful. "Dresses are for girls." And just like that, the desire had been locked away. It was wrong. It was shameful. It was not for me. From that day on, I learned to mute that part of myself, to bury it under layers of beige and gray, until it was nothing more than a faint, secret ache I felt when I saw a beautiful gown. The energy from Meera hadn't created something new in me. It had only watered a seed that had been dormant for 14 years. It had given a voice to a whisper I had been trying to ignore my whole life. Tears began to stream down my face. They weren't tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of recognition, of release. I was mourning the boy who had to hide, the boy who was told his deepest feelings were wrong, and I was grieving for all the years I had spent not knowing, not understanding this fundamental part of myself. I looked at my reflection through the blur of tears. I saw the graceful slope of my shoulders, the delicate line of my collarbone, the soft curve of my hip. I raised a hand and touched my face, tracing the line of my jaw, a jaw that no longer felt like a stranger's. And for the first time, when I looked into the mirror, I didn't see a disguise or a transformation. I saw myself. The name Caitlyn floated into my mind again. It wasn't a stage name anymore. It wasn't a lie. It felt like my name. The person in the mirror was Caitlyn. I was Caitlyn. A slow smile spread across my lips, even as the tears continued to fall. It was a smile of profound, heartbreaking, liberating acceptance. The war inside me was over. There was no Kevin to betray, no fraud to expose. There was only me, this new person, born from a secret wish and a strange twist of fate. I thought of Marcus. The fear was still there, a faint tremor in my heart. The path ahead was terrifyingly uncertain. Telling him the truth one day would be the hardest thing I'd ever have to do. But the thought of not taking that chance, of hiding away now that I had finally found myself, was infinitely worse. I walked out of the bathroom, my body feeling light and new. I picked up my phone, my fingers steady. I found the slip of paper with Marcus's number on it. With a deep breath, I began to type. "Hi Marcus, it's Caitlyn from the show. I'd love to get that coffee." As I hit send, I felt the last piece of the puzzle click into place. The journey had been strange, magical, and terrifying, but it had led me here. It had led me home. The reply came almost instantly. A simple buzz from the phone on my nightstand that made my heart leap. "Marcus, Caitlyn, I was hoping you'd text. How about tomorrow afternoon? There's a great little cafe in the West Village, 3 p.m. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. It was happening. This was real. Me 3 p.m. sounds perfect. I put the phone down, my mind racing. A date. My first date. My first date as me. The thought was equal parts thrilling and nauseating. What would I wear? What would we talk about? What if I said something wrong, did something that gave me away? I pushed the panic down. Meera's voice echoed in my head, "You belong." I had to believe it. The next day passed in a dreamlike haze. I spent the morning in a state of nervous preparation that felt like a sacred ritual. This time, it wasn't about creating a disguise. It was about expressing myself. I stood in front of my closet, which was now a colorful mix of Kevin's old, baggy clothes and Caitlyn's new, curated wardrobe. I pushed the drab hoodies and worn-out jeans to the back without a second thought. I chose my outfit with care, not a dramatic dress like the ones for the auditions, but something softer, more approachable. I settled on a high-waisted A-line skirt in a floral print of muted blues and greens, paired with a simple cream-colored cashmere sweater that was soft to the touch. It felt elegant but relaxed. I chose a pair of comfortable but stylish brown leather ankle boots with a modest heel high enough to give me that graceful posture, but low enough that I wouldn't have to worry about stumbling. The process of getting ready was no longer a fumbling, alien experience. My hands moved with a newfound confidence. I applied my makeup with a lighter touch than Meera had used, just a bit of foundation to even my skin tone, a soft blush to give my cheeks a natural flush, a coat of mascara to define my eyes, and a sheer, rose-tinted lip gloss. I let my hair fall in its natural waves over my shoulders. When I looked in the mirror, I saw Caitlyn. Not a model, not a performance, just Caitlyn. A young woman getting ready for a coffee date, and she looked happy. She looked hopeful. I arrived at the cafe a few minutes early, my nerves fluttering. It was a cozy place, with exposed brick walls and the rich aroma of coffee and baked goods. I saw him sitting at a small table near the window, bathed in the soft afternoon light. He was looking at his phone, a small smile on his face. He looked up as I approached, and his smile widened into a brilliant, welcoming grin that made my stomach feel like it was full of butterflies. "Hey," he said, standing up to greet me. "You look amazing." "Hi," I breathed, my own smile feeling more natural than it ever had before. "You found a great spot." The conversation was as easy and effortless as it had been at the fitting. He was warm, funny, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. He asked about my design studies, and I found myself talking passionately about color theory and form, my old interest finding a new voice. He told me more about his photography, how he preferred candid, emotional shots to sterile, posed fashion spreads. "That's why I noticed you at the audition," he explained, leaning forward. "Everyone else had this hard, practiced model face, but there was something else there, a vulnerability. A story, that's what's interesting." His words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Vulnerability, a story. He had seen past the facade, past the performance, and glimpsed the terrified, hopeful person underneath. He saw it not as a weakness or a flaw, but as something beautiful. I felt a powerful urge to tell him everything, to pour out the whole impossible, insane story of the fashion show, the collision, the magical transformation. To confess that the story he saw was one of a boy who had become a girl and was now sitting across from him, falling for him with every passing minute. But I couldn't. The fear was too great. The risk was too high. Not yet. So I just smiled and said, "I guess I'm still new to all of this. I haven't learned how to build the walls yet." "Good," he said softly, his eyes holding mine. "Don't." After coffee, we walked through the winding streets of the West Village. The autumn air was crisp, and golden leaves crunched under our boots. At one point, as we were navigating a crowded sidewalk, he casually reached out and took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. The gesture was so simple, so natural, and yet it sent a bolt of lightning through me. His hand was warm and strong, engulfing mine. It felt like an anchor in the swirling chaos of my new life. It felt right. I didn't pull away. I held on tighter, my heart pounding a steady, joyful rhythm against my ribs. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, just two people holding hands on a beautiful autumn day. To anyone who saw us, we were just a young couple. The thought was staggering. A month ago, I was Kevin, a ghost in a beige jacket. Now, I was Caitlyn, holding hands with a handsome photographer, feeling more myself than I ever had in my entire life. He walked me to the subway station, and as we stood at the entrance, the roar of the trains below us, he turned to face me. "I had a really great time today, Caitlyn," he said, his expression sincere. "Me too," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated for a second, his eyes searching my face. Then, he leaned in and gently kissed my cheek. His lips were soft, and the faint roughness of his stubble sent a shiver down my spine. The kiss was brief, chaste, and it completely undid me. "I'll call you," he said, giving my hand one last squeeze before letting go. I nodded, unable to speak, and watched him walk away. I brought my fingers up to the spot on my cheek where he had kissed me. The skin tingled. I floated down the subway steps and onto the train, a dazed, foolish smile plastered on my face. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, watching the dark tunnels rush by. The journey was far from over. There were still so many questions, so many fears. My old life, my family, my friends. I didn't know how I would ever explain this to them. And Marcus, the truth stood between us like a great invisible wall. But for the first time, the future didn't feel like a terrifying void. It felt like a possibility, an adventure. The train pulled into my station, and I stepped out onto the platform, joining the stream of people heading for the exit. I walked with a new sense of purpose, my steps light, my head held high. The reflection in the darkened subway window showed a young woman with a hopeful smile on her face. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I didn't know if I was strong enough to face the challenges ahead. But as I walked out of the station and into the crisp evening air, I whispered the words that had become my new truth, my new creed. My name is Caitlyn. And for the first time, it felt like a beginning, not an end. It was the first sentence of a story I was finally ready to write.